There's a huge swath of America that puts a lot of trust in financial gurus. And who are the main suspects we're talking about here? We're talking about Dave Ramsey, Suze Orman, Clark Howard, Ken Fisher, Ramit Sethi. Those are the 5 gurus I really address in the book. And this is what he uses over and over and over again. Life insurance is a steaming hot pile of garbage, and it's only sold to you by money-grubbing life insurance salesman. He basically just called them both a scam. And I think that when you call something a scam without explaining why it's a scam and really understanding the pros and cons of the issue, it feels to me a little bit like a cop-out. If you follow that course, 100% stock portfolio like Dave Ramsey recommends, and 8% withdrawal over time, you will run out of money 2/3 of the time. That's the big irony of all this. The only way to truly get 8% withdrawal rates on your portfolio in retirement is to use 2 financial tools that he is absolutely opposed to.
How can you give advice to people who want different things?
Dave Ramsey has to dispense advice in such a way where every single one of his listeners is saying, wow, Dave is speaking to me.
That's your baby step 1.
The problem is that's a linear average assumption is quite frankly not. It should be malpractice, and it would be malpractice if someone like we use that from a standpoint of helping people.
She will say, if anybody ever talks to you about cash value life insurance, you are to never work with that person. Ken Fisher's way of mitigating longevity risk is frankly the most expensive way of going about it.
You've said math a couple times, and like really utilizing math, projections, history, and saying what is the best outcome. What is David McKnight's big picture framework?
I like to refer to something that I call the Dave Ramsey circle of poverty, and it goes a little bit like this.
David, welcome to the show.
Hey, Caleb, thanks for having me.
We had you on last year, and we had a great interview, and you talked about your frameworks and taxes, and it was a great interview. I will be in the show notes for those of you that want to know more about like the backstory, David McKnight's framework on the power of zero. Again, phenomenal interview, but we're going to jump into your new book, The Guru Gap. First of all, congratulations on that amazing title. And before we dive into some of the gurus and talk about critique maybe some of their views and statements, why don't you just give a little bit of backstory of why this book, kind of where your headspace is in 2024? And I know that you just had an amazing event for financial professionals earlier this year. And so congratulations on the success that you're having, and excited to dive into this new book.
Thanks. I think it's important to also know the subtitle of the book, which is How America's Financial Gurus Are Leading You Astray and How to Get Back on Track. And so, you know, the whole idea here is that there's a huge swath of America that puts a lot of trust in financial gurus. And who are the main suspects we're talking about here? We're talking about Dave Ramsey, Suze Orman, Clark Howard, Ken Fisher, Ramit Sethi. Those are the 5 gurus I really address in the book. And you have to sort of understand, if you want to be a successful financial guru, you have to get as many eyes on your podcast as possible, as many eyes on your books as possible. So it doesn't really benefit you to have an expertise in a single niche. You have to be able to dispense advice in a sort of a one-size-fits-all, paint by the numbers, black and white sort of a way. Because in the very moment that some listener says, well, Dave or Susie, they're too niche for me, I'm going to, to really solve my financial problems, to really wring the most efficiency out of my retirement dollars, I'm going to need to get an independent financial advisor who can create a customized plan for me. In the very moment that a listener or a viewer comes to that conclusion, Dave Ramsey's lost them. And so they're no longer part of his tribe. And so Dave Ramsey has to dispense advice in such a way where every single one of his listeners is saying, wow, Dave is speaking to me.
That's your baby step 1.
This is a one-stop shop where I can go to Dave Ramsey and he can solve all my financial problems. And that is the goal of these financial gurus. The problem is that approach is not very consonant with an individual American wringing the most efficiency out of their retirement savings. It's not, and we can talk about lots of examples, but that whole paradigm, that whole financial guru paradigm, I think, is causing Americans to run out of money years in advance of when they ever thought possible. And it's because they're implementing strategies from quote unquote financial experts who are not truly financial experts, but who are just trying to build a following. And so that was really the main impetus behind the book.
Yeah, I love it. I think if you take a step back, my personal belief is everyone should want to be as efficient as possible. And my definition of efficiency is removing any friction to get to where you want to go. And it's like, how can you give advice to people who want different things? Like we all want different things. And so the idea that one size fits all is going to be like the path would be laughable. And yet on the flip side, we look in like we live in a very shallow political world where it's like you can never say that you're wrong. Like you kind of have to stay in your lane. And so for Dave Ramsey to say debt is okay if would like destroy his entire movement. And so I in one aspect respect his like ability to just like stick to one thing, because I'm way too ADD. I can't stick to anything for like, and I'm like willing to change my mind, and I love that. But again, there's me who have a teeny following, and there's Dave Ramsey, who's probably known as like America's top financial guru. So before we dive into Dave, I want to take a step back and say, what is your Dave? You should have like a debate, Dave versus Dave. What is David McKnight's big picture framework of how you think and how you believe that people should be viewing money? Because I want to set the stage before we dive in and maybe critique the other gurus that could be missing some things.
Well, I'm a big fan of academia. I'm a big fan of math. I'm a big fan of doing whatever strategy will help you literally wring the most efficiency out of your retirement savings. And sometimes that sort of approach calls for financial instruments that are nuanced, that don't fit in every single situation, that fit maybe in situations A, B, and C, but not in situations D, E, and F. And so there's some nuance when it comes to understanding how to incorporate these different financial tools into a given person's financial scenario. The problem is if you have that one size fits all approach, you don't have the luxury of the nuance. You don't have the luxury of saying, okay, listener, I could see how this annuity could work in these scenarios. He has to have, or financial gurus have to have, they have to adopt a position that is palatable for everybody. I'm just the opposite. I say, look, there's going to be some situations where, for example, a cash value life insurance policy would help extend the life of someone's retirement. And there's other situations maybe where it wouldn't. And so it's just a much more nuanced approach. And overarching this entire paradigm is a belief in my core that tax rates, even 10 years from now, are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today. And in a rising tax rate environment, there's an ideal amount of money to have in your 401k and your IRA. And so we talk about that all the time. How much should you have in your 401ks and IRAs? And if you have anything above and beyond that ideal amount, we should be systematically repositioning those things to tax-free. So really, I'm real big on math. I'm real big on trying to shield ourselves from the impact of higher taxes down the road, and then building a customized plan that helps shield us and mitigate as many risks as possible over time.
So just to be clear, jumping in, you're not anti-stock market, you're not anti-life insurance, you're not anti-annuities, you're not anti-reverse mortgages, but you're also not like a proponent of any one thing and that's going to like solve your problems. You're a fan of like taking a look at things. You've said math a couple times and like really utilizing math, projections, history, and saying what is the best outcome. One thing that you have an amazing brand on is this concept of power of zero. It's like this, when you look at all of the things going on, I don't know if you know the current, debt, liabilities, national debt, but it's like you look at this is a train wreck ready to happen. And you're like, okay, we can look at math and we can also say you're probably going to be better off if we can understand the tax liability in the future and limit that as much as possible, because that could be the thing that you could do all this thing over here and math could look great, but taxes could essentially rob your ability to have a bright future.
Yeah. And the thing that's great about what you and I do, Caleb, is our job is to take account of those things like rising tax rates and take account of all of the different financial tools that are in the toolbox. And our job is sort of fit the puzzle pieces together and figure out how they fit together in the right way. And everybody's different. There's no cookie cutter approach. And people come back to me and they say, well, Dave, aren't you a guru? Don't you fancy yourself a guru? And I say, no, I don't fancy myself a guru, because I'm really appealing to a very narrow segment of America, which is the sophisticated, disciplined investor that's done a good job of saving money for retirement. They've just saved it in the wrong types of accounts.
Yeah, I love it. All right, so we're gonna dive into some of these gurus. I think we need to start with America's most famous, controversial, potentially guru, Dave Ramsey. And what I want to do when we talk about these gurus is I want you first to share what you admire about these gurus, what you like, if there's anything that you like about what they say. Yeah, and then let's go into some of their things that you're like, hey, these messages could be damaging if they're amplified to the marketplace.
Sure. There's a lot I love about Dave Ramsey. I was listening to a talk he gave the other day. I think he was talking about biblical financial principles. And I listened to the whole thing. I said to my son, I don't think there's a single thing in there I disagree with, right? Like it was sort of this odd moment. I'm writing a book about Dave Ramsey, but everything he was saying in that talk was speaking to my core. I was like, in some sense, I'm a Dave Ramsey fan. Like I really love what he says about the debt. I love how he talks about living within your means and saving 15% of your income.
Live on less than you make. So you have a plan, you avoid debt, you save money for emergencies and later for investing.
These are all things, and I've talked personally with people that have really turned their financial lives around by implementing the types of things that Dave Ramsey talks about. And he used to be commended for the outsized impact he's had on America. I mean, he talks about it all the time. He goes, I can help more people in 15 minutes than you, CFP, that you can help, in your entire lifetime. And, it's true. He's got this massive audience and he's helping a lot of people. But I like to refer to something that I call the Dave Ramsey circle of poverty. And it goes a little bit like this. People start off in poverty because they're not living by correct financial principles. Dave Ramsey teaches them financial principles. He gets them to the point where they're saving, they're marching their way towards financial independence. They get to the point where they have this nest egg, but then he gets out of his lane. You and I talked about making sure you stay in your lane. Then he gets out of his lane and he starts dispensing advice that can literally actually force people into bankruptcy. And I'll give you one example. He recently made a lot of headlines by criticizing his co-host George Camel for preaching the 4% rule. And the 4% rule basically has been vindicated by reams of academic data and lots of, Nobel laureates over the years, over the last 4 decades, and basically says, look, there is a sustainable amount of money you should withdraw from your stock market portfolio. And if you exceed that sustainable amount, you could run out of money years in advance of life expectancy. And that number that has become the gold standard in our industry is 4%. So in other words, you got $1 million in your 401k, day one of retirement, you can take 4% out that first year and adjust it every year thereafter to keep up with inflation. Well, Dave Ramsey has somehow arrived at a number that's twice that high. He says, if you have $1 million in your 401k, you can take out 8%. And you can take out 8% every single year until you die. In other words, he says, it's like the stock market is going to deposit $80,000 into your account. No, actually, it's not $80,000. It's $120,000 because he thinks the stock market is going to grow at 12% linearly over time. Okay, so the stock market is going to deposit $120,000 in your stock market portfolio January 1st every year. And to keep up with inflation, he doesn't say take out 12%, let's build in 4% for inflation. Therefore, you should only take out 8%. But he says 8% is perfectly sustainable. And, Dr. Wade Pfau from the American College, he's actually written the foreword for my book. And he has said that if you follow that course, 100% stock portfolio like Dave Ramsey recommends, and 8% withdrawal over time, you will run out of money 2/3 of the time. In other words, 2/3 of the time, your money will not last through life expectancy. So that's what I call the Dave Ramsey circle of poverty. He gets people to implement correct financial principles. He gets them so they get to the point where they build a nest egg, and then he promptly bankrupts them by forcing them or by encouraging them to take that 8% withdrawal rate. So that's probably the biggest bone that I have to pick with Dave Ramsey. I mean, there's other smaller bones that I have to pick with him, but that's the big one. And ironically, the two ways that people could actually get 8% distribution rates, which is using annuities and life insurance in the correct way, are things that he is vehemently opposed to. Okay, so that's the big irony of all this. The only way to truly get 8% withdrawal rates on your portfolio in retirement is to use two financial tools that he is absolutely opposed to. So that's probably my biggest bone to pick with Dave Ramsey.
What's interesting is when I heard, because he's had multiple clips and he keeps them up, by the way, he keeps them up. I think I even saw a clip that he said 10%, and I don't know if I misheard him, but he's like, because his whole thing is like, of course, like if you're making 12, what's
right.
Like math is math.
Long as you're lower than 12, you're good.
Yeah, and I agree with that logic. The problem is that's a linear average assumption is quite frankly not. It should be malpractice, and it would be malpractice if someone like we use that from a standpoint of helping people. But I have a lot of empathy for him, because if you believe to your core that 12% number, then why would you do anything like annuities and life insurance? And like I get that, But at the end of the day, you're right. With one of those things crumble, then he's so adamantly against life insurance and annuities. I wonder if he knows, or if he's just like, and he just refuses to address it because it's like, hey, it would throw a grenade and other things, or if what is your thoughts on that? Like, because he has smart people around him. He talks with a lot of knowledge. Like, he understands how these products and annuity, like I've heard him talk about annuities and life insurance, and he's not like oblivious to all the things going on in there, but he thinks in almost every case that you should just cash it out. And he's told people on air to literally cash out their annuities and life insurance.
No questions asked, right? I've actually thought about this long and hard, and I believe in my heart of hearts that Dave Ramsey thinks that he's preaching the right thing. But there's another reality at play here. And if Dave Ramsey were to concede that he's wrong on any given issue, then all of a sudden his listeners are going to say, well, if he was wrong on that really important issue, if he's wrong on something as important as sustainable withdrawal rates in retirement, then what else might he be wrong about? And then it becomes sort of the slippery slope. And so he has to really stick to his guns, even in the face of, cadres of CFPs ganging up on him online and saying, Dave, you have no clue what sequence of return risk is. You have no clue what reams of academic data over the last 4 decades have said regarding sustainable withdrawal rates in retirement. He has to stick to his guns, because if he concedes defeat in any one arena, then I think that starts to bleed into the other areas where he, is professing some sort of expertise.
Yep. All right. We're going to move on to Ramit Sethi. And the reason I'm moving to him is we'll talk about Suze Orman and Clark Howard and Ken Fisher, but like to my generation, Suze Orman doesn't have a lot of influence. Don't even know who Clark Howard is. So it's just like, I know that they're gurus, but Ramit Sethi has done a phenomenal job. Has a Netflix show, has book I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and has done a really, I would say from my age group, when we look up to a financial guru, Ramit has done a phenomenal job from a standpoint of branding. And my thought, he hates life insurance, hates it. And then he hates, essentially advisors charging a fee for assets under management. And he hates the Bank of America. And let's see what other things that he hates. He's extremely liberal. And so those are the key points that I have. But overall, I like a lot of what he has to say. So same thing with Ramit. What do you like about him? And then where are your critiques, and where do you think he's leading people astray?
Yeah, I mean, the heart of what he does is he gets people out of debt. I mean, he gets people on the path to wealth. And so the heart of what he does, I don't have any problem with it. It's just sort of my little critiquey nibbling around the edges. So he's good at what he does. He obviously has a best-selling book. He's got a Netflix documentary. Those are all great. I didn't see anything in the Netflix documentary that I found too objectionable. Most of his book was actually good until he got to the part about annuities and life insurance. And part of the issue that I have was he dedicates about that, maybe 3 paragraphs in his book to life insurance and annuities. And he tells this story where he had a friend who called up and said, yeah, I've got this financial advisor who sold me a whole life policy and an annuity. And without really digging into the details as to why, he basically just called them both a scam. And I think that when you call something a scam without explaining why it's a scam and really understanding the pros and cons of the issue, it feels to me a little bit like a cop-out. It feels like I'm just paying lip service to this, to what the rest of the gurus have said about these these products. I don't want to do the heavy lifting to really become acquainted with these products. Therefore, I'm just going to dismiss it with a wave of a hand and call it a scam. Very easy to do. And because it sort of resonates with what a lot of the other gurus have said, people don't really question it. The problem is it flies in the face of what these Nobel laureates. There's a movie out by the same director who did the documentary that I did, The Power of Zero, The Tax Train is Coming, called The Boomer Dilemma. And this guy's basically interviewing Nobel laureates from Ivy League schools who talk about how, for example, annuities will help you wring the most efficiency out of your retirement savings. They'll help maximize the income that you can draw from your retirement savings. I mean, we've got the likes of Ernst & Young, who recently produced a study talking about how a combination of life insurance as a volatility buffer in retirement and guaranteeing lifetime income annuities actually give you superior levels of income in retirement to the stock market approach alone, which is what Ramit Sethi is actually recommending. And so I just want a little bit more nuance, a little bit more heavy lifting, a little bit more, a little bit more legwork from these gurus who profess to know all of these different topics inside and out. And so I guess the thing, I'm getting fatigue from gurus opining on subjects about which they know actually very little.
Yep. Well, and a common theme, and I'm sure we're going to pick up on a common theme with all these gurus, is there's really two sides of a mountain. There's the incline or accumulation, and then there's the decline. And it seems like all the incentive and focus is on this incline, and what's easy and what's sexy is talking about net worth and like gross returns. And that's the thing. And that's where you can be like, yeah, you shouldn't be paying a fees and all these things. And I don't necessarily disagree with some of the math. But the idea is like, okay, do you have the right strategies coming down? And you're totally right. Like, you could read Ramit's book, but if you give that to someone nearing retirement, where in his book does he talk about distribution planning? Where in his book does he talk about like, this is the 4% rule and all? Like, I again, maybe I missed it, but like, I just don't like, I don't know. He's maybe talking about life insurance and annuities solely when it comes to rate of return and accumulation. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I would love some of these gurus to literally talk about distribution and to say like, this is how you come down the mountain and actually use math and data. And it'd be nice if they had one of the like actual gurus, our boy, Dr. Wade Fowle or someone else, to at least acknowledge that. Any thoughts on that? Like, that's kind of my theory and empathy of like, yeah, it's easy to talk about people going up, and it's like, obviously get the highest rate of return, like check. But then it's like that's a very shallow advice when you zoom out and you look at coming down the mountain and you look at leaving a legacy. I think some of those things don't get appreciated or don't get focused when gurus open their mouths.
Yeah, I think that the likes of Ramit Sethi and Suze Orman, Dave Ramsey, these guys are all popular because there is like I said, a huge swath of America who's financially undereducated that are looking for guidance, frankly. And Ramit Sethi has packaged that guidance in a way that appeals to, like I said, a broad swath of America. The problem with this approach is, and this whole, you don't need a financial advisor because the financial advisor is going to charge you X expense ratio on your portfolio, is that when you have a good financial advisor, they actually earn their keep. They actually earn that fee that they're charging you. Why? Because all of the studies show that when you don't have a financial advisor, when you're just following, for example, a book, that you're making decisions based primarily on emotion over the arc of your accumulation period. And that emotion-driven investing approach can actually cost you up to three full percentage points of return over the course of your accumulation phase. And so Where you and I, Caleb, earn our keep is we're very good at, number one, fitting the puzzle pieces together, and number two, holding their hand along the way so that they're making good decisions that align with what their ultimate investment objectives are. And so my fear is that by following a book or following a Netflix commentary or even following a podcast, you're not going to get that hand holding. And hand holding seems like a bad thing, but if you're paying a financial advisor a fee, you should expect some hand holding along the way. And that's not what these gurus are going to give you. They're not going to give you hand holding. They're going to give you one size fits all, paid by the numbers sort of advice. And believe it or not, I mean, that can really take a toll on your returns over time.
Yeah. Let's talk about Ken Fisher. I believe Ken knows better. Like, I'll give Dave Ramsey and Suze Orman and Ramit a pass, but Ken's literally runs a company helping retirees, and he's got to know he's got to know, why does he hate annuities so bad? Like, he literally pretty much thinks annuities are the worst thing in the world. And I think he's even said, maybe I'm putting words in his mouth, that he'd rather like burn in hell than sell you an annuity or something. And that's like, I don't even want to touch those words from a standpoint, but like, why is he so adamantly against it? And how is he still like prevalent? And why do people still work with him?
I mean, that's a good question. He is an RIA. He's the biggest RIA in the country, I believe. He manages $210 billion. And there's a couple of bones I have to pick with him. I think that, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. He is not in the business of selling annuities. Annuities are his competition. He's got a bias against annuities because he does not get paid to sell you an annuity. He does not get paid to maximize your distribution rate in retirement. The problem is, Dr. Michael Finke talks about this very eloquently in a recent article. He says there's two things that annuities can do. And Ken Fisher, if he's being truthful, he cannot deny these two things. There's two things that annuities can do that a pure stock market portfolio can't do. Number one, they can guarantee that you're going to receive a paycheck so long as you're on this side of the grass, that your money will last as long as you do. That's one thing a stock market portfolio cannot do. Okay, even with the 4% rule, there's a 15% chance you could run out of money prior to life expectancy. The second thing that an annuity can help you do that a stock market can't is it can actually help you spend more money in retirement. You spend more money in retirement by utilizing annuities than by the stock market approach alone. For example, according to Ken Fisher, who loves the 4% rule, if you want $40,000 per year adjusted every year thereafter for inflation starting year one of retirement, you need to save $1 million. Okay, that's going to give you that $40,000 per year adjusted for inflation every year thereafter. If you utilize an annuity, especially under today's interest rates, you can get that same level of income guaranteed, including inflation, for more like $650,000. So in other words, I can accomplish the exact same thing that Ken Fisher can accomplish with his stock market portfolio with 100% guarantee my money will last through life expectancy. And I have an extra $350,000 that I can do some very interesting things with. For example, I can use it to build a discretionary fund in the event that I have some emergency along the way. I can use it to put some money into what I call the life insurance retirement plan that can give me a death benefit in advance of my death for the purpose of paying for long-term care. So Ken Fisher's way of mitigating longevity risk is frankly the most expensive way of going about doing it. And when you utilize things like annuities and life insurance, you can purge longevity risk from your portfolio much more inexpensively, and you can get some guarantees that your money will last as long as you're alive. Let's
talk about Suze Orman. And again, this is someone who I've heard a lot of people talk about. I've never actually I've never watched a Suze Orman show or whatnot. I've seen clips of her talking about life insurance. But what do you like about Suze Orman? And then what are the things that you say that are not okay with?
There's a lot to like about Suze Orman. I think she does a really good job. She's much more in tune with the data and academia than Dave Ramsey is. She talks about the 4% rule. She says the 4% rule may even be the 3% rule. They may need to update the 4% rule with more prevailing data. So kudos to her for for staying in touch with the data. And generally, when I read a Suze Orman post, I find myself nodding and agreeing. She doesn't like annuities and she doesn't like life insurance. So this is sort of this recurring theme where, you know, and I get it. I think that there's a lot of, and it's easy to conflate bad products with bad salesmen. And there's a lot of bad salesmen out there that are preying upon people who frankly may not need life insurance or annuities. Okay.
Yep.
I see people all the time.
Your books. They're using your books. They're using my books. They're using our videos to push their agenda. And I understand that it sucks.
I see that happening all the time where people will use my book as a cudgel to get someone to buy a life insurance policy. And that's just, you know, I believe in using life insurance, but as, you know, as one of multiple streams of tax-free income that don't show up on the IRS's radar, but ultimately contribute to you being in the 0% tax bracket in retirement. So I think Suze Orman is doing a good service by trying to knock these people who don't ultimately have their client's best interest at heart. But she does so in a very sweeping, one-size-fits-all way. So, for example, she will say, if anybody ever talks to you about cash value life insurance, you are to never work with that person again. Okay. You are to turn around and run the other way. Well, you know, this is the one-size-fits-all guru dispensed advice that I think that it's, you know, it's lacks the nuance. And I don't think that they've done the heavy lifting to really understand how the product works and to really reflect upon this idea that if they make a sweeping condemnation of a given financial product, they're basically saying that there isn't a single scenario in which that particular financial tool might ultimately improve your financial situation. And so that's really the problem that I have with Suze Orman. 95% of the stuff that she does is terrific. I've seen her on Good Morning America say, look, 10 years from now, tax rates are going to skyrocket. You should be doing Roth IRAs. You should be doing Roth 401ks. You should be doing Roth conversions. I did a video recently where I said the surprising truth around Suze Orman's stance on tax-free retirement planning. And she basically is David McKnight minus life insurance and annuities. Okay. So she's very, very strong on that front. And I say as much in my book. I just have to take her to task on her, you know, her monolithic position on life insurance and annuities for that matter.
It sounds like though she can be converted, because if she already is preaching the 3 or 4% rule, that really needs to be understood to appreciate insurance products like annuities and life insurance. And again, she's even preaching that, but then she's going back to rate of return, good, bad, good, the fees, surrender charges, good, bad, and she's not looking at like what's the outcome. And it's interesting because no one wants to throw away their Social Securities, and no one's like saying, "Oh, you have a pension, like that's horrible, like you were left in the dark." In fact, like anyone who has a pension, is something like the best models we see are the people that have built-in pensions versus not, and it's essentially an annuity. So I wonder if someone like you could respectfully get her attention and potentially be able to share, and at least for her to say, hey, I'm not a fan of life insurance and annuities and the accumulation, which you and I both know that would still be wrong for you to be able to say, because you have to think at the end in mind. But for her to acknowledge that, hey, life insurance and annuities could be used to enhance retirement income, and only use it if you're thinking with the end in mind and you're working with a financial professional that has that. It'd be an interesting, I feel like she's a lot closer than any other gurus because she's at least acknowledging the withdrawal rates.
Yeah, I think that if she read my book and she did so with an open mind, I don't know. I think this is probably one of the first books through a major publisher that takes direct aim at financial gurus. I'm not aware of any other books through any of the major publishers that are taking aim at the likes of Dave Ramsey. So maybe the unique nature of this book actually targeting these particular gurus will get her attention in a way that maybe, a YouTube video from you or me might not get her attention. So I think there's two contexts that I think she could really come around on. And it's this idea that life insurance is an excellent bond replacement. So Tom Agnes says this all the time: reach into your portfolio, remove the bonds, replace them with cash value life insurance. You'll increase your return. You'll lower your risk. You'll lower the standard deviation of your entire portfolio, and you'll experience a better outcome over time. That's the first one. The second context, I think that would really resonate with, there's this idea of the volatility buffer, which, you and I are very familiar with. And that's the idea that if you can accumulate 3 to 5 years worth of living expenses in your cash value life insurance by day one of retirement, and then in a year following a down year in your stock market portfolio in the first 10 years of retirement, you pay for your living expenses out of your cash value life insurance, that will give your stock market portfolio a chance to recover before you take further distributions. And that act alone will allow you to distribute as much as 8% of your stock market portfolio over time with a 95% certainty that you will not run out of money prior to life expectancy. I think those two strategies alone, if she looked at the math behind it, I think that she would come around. And I think that of all the gurus we've talked about today, she's probably shows the most promise.
Man, I can't wait to see that sit down conversation. I think that would, I think both parties would be shocked on how respectful that could be, and how there could be a lot of growth. Because if you get the financial professionals in line with the best marketing people, I think there's some good things that could happen. Let's talk about Clark Howard. Not familiar with this person. I think this guy wears glasses and he has a call-in show. But other than that, I could not tell you a single thing of what he teaches. But, so you tell me what type of guru he is, what you like about him, what you don't.
Yeah, he's a nationally syndicated radio show host. He's in radio stations all across the country. He's a bit of an older guy. He was more popular in the 90s, I think, in the early 2000s, but he's still kicking around out there. He's still got a radio show. He's still got a YouTube channel. And people still pay attention to Clark Howard. I love Clark Howard. He talks about in his radio show, I'm here to help you, sock more. Can't remember how he says it. It's like put more bang in your wallet and put more bang in your wallet and help protect you from getting ripped off. That's, he's really down on, for example, timeshares. And so, so I guess he wouldn't get along with, well, anyway, so he's out to protect the consumer. He's sort of like the Ralph Nader of the financial space, which I think is good. So a lot of good things there. But again, he makes one size fits all statements about both fixed index annuities and permanent life insurance. He says, and this is what he uses over and over and over again, life insurance is a steaming hot pile of garbage, and it's only sold to you by money-grubbing life insurance salesmen. So there's a lot of charged language there. And how could you help but want to avoid not just life insurance, but life insurance salesmen with that type of characterization? He says fixed index annuities, and he really doesn't really understand how fixed index annuities works, but that hasn't stopped him from commenting on them. He basically says that, fixed index annuities are being sold by, people that tell you that you can get the upside of the market, unlimited upside of the market, and guarantee against loss. But if you don't read specific provisions in the contract, if you don't obey everything you have to do with precision, then you can experience stock market loss. So, just right there, that tells you that he doesn't fully understand that this is not a stock market product. The growth in your account is linked to the upward movement of a stock market index up to a cap, and you're guaranteed, regardless of how negligent you are of what the policy says, you're guaranteed to never lose money in the market. And so like Dave Ramsey and other gurus, they have very, very superficial understandings of how these products work, but just enough to be dangerous and just enough to give our industry a black eye when someone calls in and asks about it.
I feel like the prerequisite to be a financial guru. Do you like index funds? Yes, unless you're named Dave Ramsey. Okay. Yes. All right. Do you hate life insurance? Yes. Do you hate annuities? Yes. All right. You are qualified to speak to America, and you're just going to be super popular. I love it. There's a common theme here, and it really comes down to every one of these gurus hate annuities, hate life insurance, and don't just like not like it, but they're very adamantly against, like, you are getting ripped off. They use words like scam. They get, and that's where I think that's where it's hurtful, because it's like, listen, you have no context of this person's situation, and you don't know who's they're working with. You don't know the type of plan or strategy that's being talked about, and you have influence and you have power, And not only are you saying that the person that they're working with is a scam, but now you're creating doubt in all these people's minds from a standpoint of like, am I doing, is my person a scam? Like, what am I doing? And you're creating even more uncertainty. And that's where I'm hoping that we can have conversations. Dave Ramsey would be at the top of my list to be able to interview. And I would love to just respectfully talk through different things. I don't necessarily think he's going to change his mind. I'm open to changing mine if he can make good points. But at the end of the day, I'm just hoping that we can have more conversations that are hopefully more getting closer to the middle.
Sorry, the thing is these gurus are right a lot of the time. I mean, some of the policies that are being peddled out there and the context in which they're being peddled are steaming hot piles of garbage. I mean, it's true.
Yep.
There are some annuities that are steaming hot piles of garbage that shouldn't be used in a given context. So I don't think that whatever has inspired their particular position is necessarily coming from a bad place. It's just that when you make sweeping characterizations, sweeping statements about a given financial tool that are supposed to, you mentioned earlier, Dave Ramsey says, if you have a cash value life insurance policy, you should cash it out. No questions asked, right? He doesn't talk about whether you have lost your insurability. He doesn't talk about whether you have a massive surrender charge. You should cash it out. No questions asked. These are irresponsible statements. Particularly since a lot of times these have been sold the right way in the right context, and they're going to bring about a very real life benefit as a result of the stipulations in the program. And so I think that their positions have been inspired from, I think accurate real life scenarios, but they've then taken that and they've morphed it into a worldview that is all encompassing. And I think that's the problem.
Is it fair to say that if anyone's promoting one thing, blanket, we're talking even life insurance, reverse mortgages, annuities, index funds, if you're promoting one thing and it's like the blanket statement that you might be right to a group of people, but you might be wrong across the board. And I think we should there's a lot of people that are preaching infinite banking over here, and everyone needs an annuity over here, and everyone needs an IUL over here. And it's like, okay, is it possible that maybe we should take a step back and do a better job with the process of figuring out where someone wants to go, look at the data, and then look at financial tools as tools and not just like that, what you said earlier, that hammer and nail kind of deal. It's like, oh, I'm going to fit this around my agenda to prove a point. Any thoughts around that? And then my next question for you is what financial gurus out there or thought leaders out there should we be following other than you? Yeah. Is there other people that are like, you're like, hey, they got a good pulse on things. They're articulating things well. And like, you will not be led astray if you're like watching or reading these people's books.
Yeah. So let's get back to your first question. If we're talking about an RIA like Ken Fisher, these people have a fiduciary responsibility to make recommendations that they can defend in a court of law. They have a fiduciary responsibility to make a recommendation. And Michael Finke drives this point home. He says, look, if an annuity can provide more income over time and give you better guarantees and a higher likelihood of purging longevity risk from your situation, and you don't bring it up, you could technically be liable. And he talks about how Ken Fisher's stance, where people call in and consult about their annuity, and he recommends that they replace the annuity every single time, without fail, replace the annuity, take the surrender charge, roll it over to Fisher Investments, and you're going to be better off. If you're a fiduciary, I don't know how you could defend that in a court of law. And so I wish more people would take, if they're not fiduciaries, I at least would hope that they would take a fiduciary approach where they could say, is the recommendation that I'm making defendable in a court of law? Okay, so that's, who are the types of people that I think America should be following besides me? Well, you talked about our recent Heroes of Zero conference. We had Ed Slott, we had Tom Hegna, we had Van Miller. So all three of those guys are people that are very admirable and to be followed. Ed Slott is America's CPA. Wall Street Journal called him the America's IRA expert. He knows more about this stuff than just about anyone else on the planet. And he wrote the foreword for the Power of Zero. He and I are like two peas in a pod. He's a CPA. He says life insurance is the single greatest tax benefit in the IRS tax code. I don't know how you square that with Dave Ramsey, who conversely says, if you have a cash value life insurance policy, you should dump it, no questions asked. I mean, I don't know how you square those two things, right? Yeah. So Ed Slott's he loves Roth conversions, believes that tax rates in the future are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today. Tom Hegna is probably the foremost expert in the world on guaranteed lifetime income. He wrote the foreword for my book, Tax-Free Income for Life. And he's the guy that says that, you could talk to 50 different retirement experts. They can give you 50 different recommendations, but he says, look, if they don't include an annuity, they are mathematically not the best recommendation. And so he's always saying, reach in your portfolio, remove the bonds, replace it with cash value life insurance or annuities. You'll increase your return, lower your risk, lower the standard deviation of your entire portfolio, and experience a better outcome over time. So, and of course, guys like you, Caleb, are out there, preaching the good word. So there's a lot of people out there that are to be admired for what they're doing and the wrongs that they're righting every single day, and clearing up all of the confusion generated by these gurus. But I think Ed Slott and Tom Hegna and Ben Miller, of course, are all preaching really, really solid messages right now.
I love it. I appreciate you sharing that. Let's anything else you want to say as it relates to your book? How can people get it, and how can people support this message? Because I have another question, but it's not related necessarily to your book.
Sure. Book is going to be going up for pre-sale probably in the next month, so it's not available quite yet. So here we are in June. So sometime probably in July, it's going to be ready for a pre-order. And then it'll come out sometime in the fall. So we're still waiting on details on all of that. But the book's been written, the foreword's been written, the cover's been created. It's all ready to go. We're just waiting for some things to fall into place.
And you're ready for some taking some shots, because you know that you're literally you're calling out people that have bigger platforms than you. And so have you thought, and this is going to be published through a publisher, so are you worried about getting any legal letters or anything, or are you staying kind of above board in the way that you call people out?
Yeah, the whole manuscript went through the legal department of this publisher, and I was surprised they didn't have a lot to change. I mean, they basically, there was one statement that's a pretty bold statement. They said, instead of making that a statement, let's put a question mark at the end to make it to soften it up a little bit. So I was actually pretty pleased when it came back that they really didn't change much about the manuscript. I mean, I think that you should be able to call a spade, and if you got a bone to pick with someone and it's true and it can be supported by the facts, that you should be able to write it in America.
Well, and what we have is a ton of public record of people saying certain things. And so it's not one of these things where you were like, hey, I went out to dinner with Dave Ramsey and he allegedly said, it's like, you got to be careful with stuff like that. But it's like, no, there's videos that this person is not taking down, in fact, has millions of views promoting this, and you can reference that and then use data to give your opinion, and your opinion could potentially have more math and logic versus others. So anyways, let's go to two other gurus that I see in the life insurance space. And I think it's fair to say, David, that you're a fan of life insurance. And when you look at life insurance, there's like whole life, IUL. You've had videos, you've even said on my show, like, hey, like you like both. You probably lean more towards the IUL because you're talking a lot about in the retirement income space. And when you look at the data, you're like, hey, IULs, when set up and used properly, probably are a more efficient, and I can live with the upside with the potential a little bit downside. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like, you're a fan of both, but you're definitely more in the camp of the IUL camp. My question is, there's two other people that heavily promote IULs that I would love to get your thoughts on. One is Doug Andrews, and the other is Curtis Ray. And again, they both have different styles. Curtis Ray takes this MPI approach and pretty much is like, MPI is the thing that is going to change your life. And he's using Index Universal Life in leverage. And again, don't want to put words in his mouth, but he has videos of him literally saying like, fund the IUL, use that leverage. And then he looks at the retirement income that could come out of an IUL. I think there's a lot of potential problems I have with that, and I would love to hear your thoughts of what you like, what you don't like. And then Doug Andrews has what he calls the laser fund, and it's very much, again, like, hey, take everything out, put it into life insurance, because an IUL, when set up and used properly, will give you a lot of retirement income. That's all tax-free. And they're saying some things that are true, but they could be saying some things that might not compound well and potentially give a lot of other people that sell life insurance a bad name. These are my words. I'll hand it over to you, and you can say whatever you want to say, or you can decline to comment if you don't want to.
Not very often I decline to comment. So let's start with Curtis Ray. I like him. I've talked to him. I don't consider him a friend necessarily, an acquaintance. And he seems like a nice, reasonable guy. And I think that what he's done with MPI is he's basically found a way to create a spreadsheet in which he can show leveraged variable loans on a life insurance policy. Basically, I don't profess to understand it, maybe even as well as you, but my understanding is you're taking money out by way of a loan, you're putting it right back in so as to maximize arbitrage over time. And when you look at that on paper, when you look at the spreadsheet, it outperforms pretty much anything else out there. Looks very, very sexy. And if what's on the spreadsheet holds true, then what Curtis Ray is saying holds true. You should put all of your money into indexed universal life because you're going to have so much more money on the back end than you otherwise would had you just did, for example, a Roth IRA. So how often in life do things look great on paper, but they don't actually play out all that great in real life? And that is my huge concern with this approach. There's a lot of administration and minutia that have to happen behind the scenes for the client to get the outcome on the back end. And so does the average American have the appetite for all of that administration, taking the loan and then putting it back in? And is the advisor actually going to keep in contact with that person so that 3 years down the road, when they need to increase their death benefit, they can increase their death benefit and then keep track of all these loans? There's a lot of moving parts in this program. And frankly, I think that when you're luring people in with the sexiness of a spreadsheet, it's not even on the official life insurance software. You have to create a spreadsheet that shows how it works because it's not actually compliant to show how it works on the actual software. And so I think that when you have to sort of jerry-rig a spreadsheet to be able to show these types of benefits, it just gives me a little bit of pause. And it's not something I would personally do. It's not something any of my clients personally do. But you understand the appeal of it. And the appeal of it is that if everything plays out like it does on that spreadsheet, you're going to be light years ahead of where you would were you to take, for example, the approach that you and I are preaching. The question is that attainable? And in order for it to be attainable, there's a lot of minutia, a lot of administration, a lot of loaning money out and recontributing it year over year, increasing death benefit, all that stuff down the road. Oh man, it just, I get anxious just thinking about it. You know, it's just a lot of
leverage is an amplifier. Leverage is an amplifier, and it amplifies, it can amplify amazing things, but it also can amplify things that if things don't turn out well, it can amplify that as well. And one of my thoughts is like, you're taking a safe asset, somewhat safe asset, and you're trying to optimize it, maximize it, like you said. And if it all works out, yeah. But I mean, we've been around long enough to know that things change, and I just, maybe I'm an old soul, but I don't want to take someone's safest asset that potentially could be their portion of their bond portfolio and make that be the thing that's, if it works out, is amazing. But if it doesn't, don't even really have a track record to see what's going to happen. Any last comments on that until we go to Doug Andrews?
Yeah, I've never met Doug. We both, he's from Utah. I went to BYU. So had I stayed in Utah, I probably would have bumped into him sooner or later. I think that Doug has done a good job basically putting life insurance in the spotlight. Okay. He's a pioneer in our industry. And I think he does a good job of explaining the value proposition of an IUL. I guess what runs counter to my philosophical worldview is I get very, very uneasy when somebody talks about a silver bullet, one size fits all, gonna, like you said, gonna fix your marriage type financial tool. I think life insurance works best when used in concert with lots of other tax-free retirement tools. I think life insurance really comes to life when utilized with Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, Roth conversions, taking money out of your IRA up to your standard deduction. And if you can keep your provisional income low enough, then your Social Security is also tax-free. So I'm a huge fan of the IUL when used in context with all of those other things. I think there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong if IUL is your only tax-free stream of income. And I've tried to give Doug Andrew the benefit of the doubt on this. I've watched a lot of his videos, and I keep trying to look for places where he talks about the Roth IRA, but more often than not, it seems like he's slamming the Roth IRA. And so I guess if I could sit down and have a conversation with Doug, I'd say, Doug, I love what you're doing, man. Let's talk about the IUL. And then I think it comes out of just this, maybe a lack of an abundance mentality on the part of some, that they think that Americans only have a finite amount of money in their budget. And if they've only got a finite amount of money in their budget, then I don't want to give any of it to the Roth IRA. I got to get it all into life insurance. And that's just not how it works. So I guess that's the bone I have to pick with Doug. I haven't been shy about that. I've said that in a couple of different videos, that let's praise the benefits of cash value life insurance, but let's do it not to the exclusion of all of these other great tax-free streams of income that, I tell people, let's just take advantage of every nook and cranny in the IRS tax code, and everything's going to work out just fine.
Yeah, I think we could bring this back to parenting. You can have your kids be confident in themselves without tearing down other people. Like there can be abundance. I remember the epiphany that I had where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna have a platform and highlight other people in our space. And I believe that we can create a bigger pie. And that's exactly what we're doing. Like the type of content, the books that you're making. Yeah, you're growing. You're creating an amazing movement. And that movement is helping people like myself and other people that are getting into the space. And that only works because we believe that the more people that can understand this stuff, like their eyes can be open, and there should be a huge demand for what we do. And the more type of content and books that go out that get people to think differently, hopefully will increase that pie. And there's just going to be a huge need for good people to serve people. So Dave, this has been a phenomenal sit down. Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to say in closing, with where you believe taxes are going to be in 2026, with the presidential election coming up, with just where your headspace is at with this book coming out? Is there any final thoughts that you want to share with our audience? And then we will do our very best to have our audience get behind what you're doing. And my hope is that people will, in July or whenever the book comes out, will be able to support you, but more importantly, get a book and be able to better understand why they believe what they believe.
No, I think I've touched about everything that I think we should touch on today. Obviously believe that we all know tax rates are going up in 2026. My real concern is what's going to happen in 2030 and beyond, when I think tax rates could potentially double, but maybe that's for another episode. But I think I just I'd like to reiterate, I love Financial Gurus. They preach a lot of good stuff. They do a lot of good for a lot of people. They get people off of square one and marching towards financial independence. I think we just need to, I'm just trying to advance the dialogue around sustainable retirement planning solutions. And that's really, it's nothing malicious. I'm not trying to do anything malicious. I'm just trying to advance that dialogue. And if this book goes a little bit of way down the road to realizing realizing that goal, then I think it would have been time that was well spent.
I love it. David, thank you so much for taking time, and look forward to reading the book.
Thanks, Kayla. It was my pleasure.